you're live.
In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Good Morning Cranberry. Today's hosts are James Murch, Amber Walls, and Samson Gaither. Our guest of honor today is Robin Freeman. Turn it over to you, James.
Robin, what is your writing kryptonite?
Sorry,
What is your writing kryptonite?
what am I writing? I have done these 4 picture books. Bedtime was the first one. These are non-fiction picture books. So this was a little history of all the places people have slept down through the years. Then came Hairdo, a history of hairstyles. Candy, how sweet it is and was, a history of candy from, Egyptians down to the present day. And who can read this word?
Underwear.
History of underwear. That was really, the research was really fun to do on that because it got into germs and cotton and slavery and what astronauts wear when they go to the moon and, all these things. And then I wrote something different. This is fiction. This was a novel that came out a year and a half ago. One good thing about America, about an immigrant girl in her first year in a typical American school in 4th grade, sort of like South Portland. So.
If I may make a note to speak up, everyone, because we don't have microphones. I want it to pick up on this. So speak up loud and clear.
How many hours a day do you write?
When I'm working on a book, so I was just telling you that I just heard that a new novel is going to be published in 2 years, which I'm very excited about. So this past winter, I was working hard on a new story, a new fictional novel like that. And I had left teaching by that time, so I would work maybe 3 or 4 days a week, and I would sit down and write a whole chapter in a day. So that could be 5 or 6 hours. I would get this chapter finished. And 3 or 4 days, that was probably as much as I could do because it's just really tiring.
Do you mind telling our audience a little bit about your background and how you came to this island?
Yes. I have a picture, actually, of me on my mother's lap in Mickey's house. I think I was 3 months old or something. So Mickey McFarland's my uncle. So his house was my grandmother's house. So we would come up every summer and visit her and my grandfather and Mickey. So I would come up every summer, just for maybe a week or 2. But I've been coming for a long time. Yeah.
Do you think big ego would help or hurt writers?
A big ego. That's an interesting. Is that on your list? That's a really interesting question. So I'm thinking just off the top of my head, when I sit down to write, so this maybe just works for me and not everybody, but when I sit down, I need to get myself out of the way. I'm deep in the characters that I've made up, and it's almost like running a little movie in my head, and I need to see what they're doing, and I need to be in their one head, and then I need to be in somebody else's head if it's a scene, and I need to see what they're all doing. And if I'm thinking about myself or worrying about anything or what people are going to think about my writing, if there are criticisms, I really need to just say to those voices, shut up, go away, and just be in the story so that I can make it the best I can possible. So after saying all that, I'm thinking that a big ego would not be helpful. At least not during the writing time.
How did publishing your first book change your writing process?
It So it was a long time, writing a lot of different stories that never got published, which is just as well because they weren't very good, but I learned a lot. But when the editor, and I've had the same editor, same publishing company for all these books, but when she called me to tell me that she wanted to publish Bedtime, it was like being given a green light. Like someone, a professional with a lot of experience, you know, sitting in a publishing company in New York City, was saying, you can do this. You can do this. And when I went to meet her, we talked about Bedtime, but then she said, so what do you want to do next? And it was just like this wonderful door opening, like a green light. So it made me work harder, I think, because I had more of a goal in mind. I knew I could do this if I really worked hard at it. So that's how it changed. It just made me work harder, I think.
Did you always want to be a writer?
Yes. So I've always been a reader. I mean, once I learned to read, I fell in love with chapter books. Picture books were fun, but what I really remember is when I got to read novels, and I loved going into stories. I just loved it. It really was like falling in love, I think. I loved reading. So at some point, I wanted to make up my own stories. And when I go to schools, I tell students, I'm not a dancer, I'm not a painter, I'm not a poet, I don't sing. I mean, I wish I did some of those things, but I don't. But when I want to remember something or express myself or understand something, it comes out as words, it comes out as writing. So I love the process of making up my own story. I just love that. It's really hard, but it's really fun. So yes, I think I've always wanted to be a writer. Yeah, I love it. I love doing that.
Does writing energize or exhaust you?
Both, absolutely, definitely. At the end of a day of writing, I am usually starving because I haven't been, skipped a meal or something. I'm tired, so I'm physically tired and hungry and everything. But when you can make the words come out right and you get something on paper and it's the way you want it, it just feels so good. It just feels so right. It just feels like it's what I'm supposed to be doing. And so both. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird because it's like the feeling, I think, if you've worked hard and done a good job, you feel like you've accomplished something. So that feels good, but at the same time you're worn out.
Do you ever read your book reviews, and how do you deal with average book reviews?
I do read book reviews. So for children's books, there are a lot of professional journals that my publisher sends advance copies out to all the school library journal, all the bookstores, all the different associations, Publishers Weekly. There's a lot of different organizations who review books. And then my publisher sends me copies of the reviews. So I read them, and they get rated. You get stars or pointers or awards and their prizes and different things. So it's not always fun because people criticizing what you've done. But it's important to know where your writing is fitting in with everybody else's. But you can't take them all seriously. But it's helpful.
We talked about this a little bit before, but how long on average does it take you to write?
So the picture books would take a year. Even, I mean, every picture book, every regular picture book is 32 pages. That's the way the printing presses actually work. They come out in sections of 4 or 8 or whatever. So even though it's a 32-page picture book, which is not too big, and I'm just doing the words, I'm not doing the pictures, it would take a year because the research, I didn't want to just put in stuff kids could find in Wikipedia. I mean, I needed to find the really weird, interesting facts. So I did a lot of research, maybe for 8 or 9 months, and then the writing would just be, a couple of months, condensing it and putting it all together.
Why are you copying?
So each one would take a year.
Stop copying.
This story was the stories of all my students. I was teaching English to English language learners, either students who were either new to this country or who spoke another language at home. So I listened to all their stories, and this is fiction, so it's inspired by my students, but a lot of their stories are in here in one form or another. So actually, I thought this was going to be a picture book, like one of these, and I sent my editor, 10 pages, and she liked it, but she said she thought it should be a novel. So she said she would like 50 more pages, which changed the whole story, and I had to add characters and rework everything. But I did that, and she liked that, and she wanted 30 more pages, and kept asking me questions. So it grew and grew and grew into a novel. So this probably took 2 years by the time it was finally finished. Yeah. So each book is probably different. The one I just finished, that's going to be published, took me, I'd been thinking about it for a long time, all up in my head, but the writing took maybe a year. This past winter.
If you could go back to when you started writing, what would you tell your back time self?
So what I can remember when I was 15, about 15, I would write something one time and I thought it was perfect. I thought it was so beautiful and I couldn't change one word. Once was enough. And now I really enjoy the revising process. And I know now that the first time you write something, it can be better. It's not always perfect. It's usually not perfect. And it's a different process, but you get something out on paper, and that's a big hurdle to get it so it's physical, it's on paper with the computer. But then there's a whole other process that I think is very satisfying, because the more you revise and add or delete or add words or polish it, it just gets better and better, like you're polishing or something's getting shinier, it's getting better and better. And you begin to think more and more about your readers and how they will see your words. So it's, I enjoy that process because I think this is so cool about reading. Do you all like to read? I don't. No, but, so, at least for fiction. So I have this whole story in my head, and these characters, and this whole thing I've made up, but all I'm doing is putting words on a page. And most of my readers I will never meet. I will never know them. Who knows out there in the world? I will never know them, but when they read just these little marks on the paper, my ideas and my story are being translated into their minds. And my story in their heads, it's going to be a different story. It won't be exactly my story. They're going to add something to it too. But it's going to be a lot of what I've done, and it's going to come alive in their heads. And I think that's like as close as you can get to magic as possible. Isn't that amazing? I mean, it's, I'll never meet these people, but this story is going to, wake up and be alive in other people's heads somewhere.
many unpublished or like half-finished books do you have?
One, two, three novels for kids and a mystery story for adults. There's another picture book, yeah, there's like a good 5 manuscripts that are buried in my filing cabinet. And they will probably stay there. Anything else?
Well, can you describe how different the island might be today compared to maybe your childhood?
Busier, I would say, more people, more cars. When I was a little girl and my sister and I would come and visit my grandmother and Mickey, I mean, we just sort of stayed there. We would walk down to Preble Cove, and there were usually cousins and people staying at the house, so we would play cards and play games after dinner, and we didn't venture out too far. I mean, like, you guys are all over the island every day. We didn't go to, we were only here for a week or two, but what I remember is the island was quieter and not as many people, not as many cars, not as much going on, maybe. But I could be completely wrong because I pretty much stayed at the house.
If you didn't write, what would you do for work?
Well, if I came back, if I had like another life, there would be a bunch of things I would love to maybe have gone to library school and worked in it's kind of information science. I would love to have learned to dance more. I love modern dance and ballet and everything. Journalism school would have been fun, being a journalist. There are probably some other things. Oh, something like a travel agent or a travel writer, traveling and writing about it. Those are the things that I think would be most fun. Yeah. These are all good questions. Whoever found them, they're good questions.
What was the best money you ever spent as a writer?
What's the best?
Money you ever spent as a writer?
The best money?
Yeah.
Well, when my first book sold, so writing children's books, you do not make a lot of money. At all. Most writers actually make more money by visiting libraries and schools and doing authors' visits than what you get from the publisher. Anyway, when I sold my first book, Bedtime, I used that money, it's called an advance. The publisher sends you money when you sign the contract before it's even a book. And then you don't get any more money until the book is being sold and you start getting royalties. So I used my advance from that book to take me and my 2 sons, Ned and Bob, to Europe. Just on the airplane. It didn't pay for anything over there, but at least it paid for 3 airplane tickets. Yeah.
It's pretty good.
It was very good.
What's one thing you would give to be a better writer?
Oh, let's see. I guess, so for me to be a better writer, I should spend more time talking to other writers and going to conferences and reading other people's writing. I mean, part of it is just me spending time doing my writing, but for me to be a better writer, and I don't always take the time to go to conferences and read, I try and read a lot of other children's books, kind of like what I'm interested in, but that helps a lot to read what other people are writing, and I could do more of that. Mhm.
What is the first book that made you cry?
Charlotte's Web. I can remember my mother read it to my sister and I. I don't know whether I could have read it, but anyway, and we were outside in our backyard in Pennsylvania, and she was reading the chapter where Charlotte dies, and that still gets me. It's just one of my favorite children's books. But yeah, no, I can remember that was just devastating. Yeah.
What does a literary success look like to you?
Having time to write and feeling good about it. I would say it's not the monetary success. And it's not getting good book reviews all the time and stuff like that, and awards or whatever. Let's see, literary success. So it's having the time, sticking with your writing the stories or the books that you want to write, and having them published and feeling good about it. That's, yeah, for me, it can't get any better.
What would be the most difficult part of your writing process?
Just getting it right. If I'm spending days writing, so on a small level, it's finding the right words that I'm looking for up in my head, finding the words that will be as picturesque and as evocative as possible, so that my story comes alive in readers' heads. But then on a bigger level, it's finding the story, or making the story mean something, making the story important. I don't want to just write about something that doesn't affect readers emotionally. I want to find an important piece of the story. Stephen King has an idea. It's just interesting to think about, that stories already exist, and writers are just uncovering them. I think he uses an image like a paleontologist or somebody who's digging for dinosaur bones. I mean, the story is already there, and the writer is just digging away and uncovering what's there. And I'm not quite there, but I do feel, especially with this last book I just finished, I felt like it was unfolding in front of me, and it was almost like riding a wave. I was working at it, working hard, but it almost maybe had a little life of its own, and it was like riding a wave, and I would see it unfolding in front of me. What was your question again? Or what was the question?
No, it's from her.
The writing process. So I think the hardest part is that bigger picture of finding the story and finding the important emotional part of it. Because even in a children's book, I think it needs to be something that affects the reader. I don't want to just write about someone going to the grocery store and losing a quarter, or, something. I want it to affect people. So, yeah.
Do you ever view writing as a spiritual practice?
We should think about that question. That's a good one. I would say maybe no, except that I feel like writing is what I'm meant to do. It's what, if I have gifts, it's my gifts, I think, are for understanding children, younger people, and being able to be on their level a little bit, not having completely grown up, remembering what it's like to be young, and being able to tell stories that relate to younger readers. So I think part of what we do in life is figuring out who we are and what we're supposed to be doing, what we love to do, what our passion is. So that gets to be spiritual. So it feels good that I think I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, because it feels so right. Even though it's hard, it feels right for me.
What made you decide to want to try to get a book published?
So, a lot of people do self-publish their own books. There are companies where they can take their words and the company will make it into a book, and then they do all the marketing, they do all the selling around the bookstores and things. I do not enjoy that process. So for me, just for me, everybody's different. I wanted to try hard to have a real publisher publish my books, because that is like a license. There somebody in the business with the experience is telling you that you've reached that level, you've found a good idea and you're able to tell it, and it's something they think they can sell too. That comes into it. But you've reached that level, it's good enough that a company in New York City usually is telling you that they want it, they're gonna put all this work into publishing it and turn it into a book. So it's, it's not easy. There are so many children's books, but I wanted to work hard and get there. And I did not want to do the marketing part, so, yeah. Which is, it's a pain in the neck, because after writing, then you have to learn the publishing business, you have to learn how it works. And you have to spend a lot of time finding out how to send query letters to publishers and who the editors are and all that. You have to learn how the business works, like in a lot of areas, but you have to figure out how to make it work for you.
Well, do you ever hide secrets in your books that only a few people can find?
Do what? Sorry.
Do you ever hide any secrets in your book that only a few people can find?
Oh, no. Do authors do that?
I think so. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I know that some books are, have real tricky little things, or, or in the illustrations, there might be something you have to find or something. No, I think every now and then I'll be writing along and I need a name quickly for just some minor character, and I'll use some name of somebody I know, but it has nothing to do with them. It's just like I need a name, and a name pops into my head. Yeah, but no, I'm not trying to be too tricky. I want every reader who comes across my books to be able to enjoy it.
What's the most difficult thing about writing characters from the opposite sex?
I don't think that's hard. I think writing any character is hard, but I think partly because I've been a teacher, so I've known lots of boys, lots of girls, and I can usually tap into some character I want. I think just building any character is difficult. To really imagine a whole character, the inside, all the details of a person, and then write about them. I think that's hard. But I don't care too much whether it's, think the tricky thing about characters for me, I have a much easier time with the minor characters. But like the main character in a book, so with the books that you read, the main character is often someone you can relate to. So it's like an everyman character, an every person. You have to be able to relate to the main character. So you don't want them to be too crazy, sort of. So I think main characters are harder for me.
How long were you a part-time writer before you became a full-time writer?
Oh, probably, like 20, 30 years or something, I mean, I started, I was bringing up my two boys, I was teaching nursery school, which was great, because nonfiction, I could just do little bits and pieces of research, but I took a few years off and wrote full-time a while ago, and now I've retired from teaching, but yeah, no, I was always doing something else most of the time, so probably a good, 20 or 30 years. Mhm.
Do you believe in writer's block?
Yes, let's all knock on the table. I don't, it has not been a problem for me. But I know certainly it is a problem for some people, so, I'm trying to avoid it. I spend so much time thinking about stories in my head before I get to the computer, that by the time I sit down to write, I have plenty of ideas that need to come out. So anyway, for whatever reason, it has not been a problem for me. Thank goodness.
What's your favorite unappreciated novel?
My favorite
Unappreciated.
unappreciated novel. That might take a while to think about. It's children's or adults, right? But, I'm not sure. There've been one or two, but I probably can't even remember their names now. Yeah, I can't think. I'm sure I'll think about one tonight in the middle of the night, but. So, how are we doing for time? Just in interest of public disclosure, I have to get to the library on Cranberry shortly to work at the library. But we have like 5 more minutes, or maybe.
Well, what's the best way to market your books?
Well, when the last book came out, I had to do a lot of stuff online. I was still teaching, so my publisher sent me on a blog tour, and I had to write up interviews and pieces for different blogs. There are people who do blogs for children's books. So for 2 weeks, I had to do 10 different pieces for these different blogs. So I did that. I try to be good about Facebook and social media, and I have a blog on my website, and I don't keep up with it as much as I should. When I had dinner with my editor in New York a while ago, and this book had come out, and I asked her, I said, so what can I do? What's the next best thing I can do? And she looked at me and she said, write another book. Okay. Write another book, because the new book will sell, the new book will help the earlier books. When you see an author, you'll usually on the cover it'll say, oh, author of, it'll list different titles. It just builds up your repertoire, and every new book helps your name recognition, it helps the earlier books. Some authors are good, and a new book comes out practically every year. But that's what she said when I asked her. She said, write another book. Okay.
Well, what was your hardest scene to write? So do you think you could describe it for us?
The hardest thing?
The hardest scene to write.
The hardest scene? Well, I think beginnings are hard. I often will start a story, but then later I'll go back and I'll think that's just a really boring way to start. It's tricky because you want to pull readers in and be exciting enough without it being like a roller coaster ride. You don't want it just to be like a crazy action film where it's just like way too much. So yeah, it's tricky. You want to draw readers in and make it interesting right in the beginning without it being just too much or too silly. The more I got into this book, I just finished, it just flowed. It was not hard. It was just really fun to write. I'll just tell you, just tell you a little bit. So it's about some kids who hang out at a retirement home after school every day because their mothers work at the retirement home. So it's a lot like where my parents were. And one of the old residents there is this old guy, not unlike Mickey McFarlane. So you can maybe imagine, if you knew my uncle, he's pretty grumpy and he doesn't like people, and he's old. So I mean, he could be kind of crazy. He could have dementia and Alzheimer's. You don't know. So there's this question of how strange is he really strange or just crazy, and you don't know until the end. And there's a little bit of magic that comes into it, which is not Mickey McFarlane, but yes, there is a question about who he really is. And yeah, I think it turned out okay.
How do you select the names of your characters?
So often the minor characters, those names kind of pop into my head, but the main characters, I work long and hard. I go back and forth. Names are important, and I want to hit it just right. So for the main important characters, and sometimes I'll go to the phone book. I'll look everywhere. I'll look, credits after movies. The credits that go on forever that are absolutely meaningless. Well, every now and then I'll be sitting there just looking at all these names, and thinking about them, and and you want names that people don't use all the time, but not something. Anyway, names for main characters take a long time for me to find the right one. Yeah, the story I'm thinking of now, the next story, I have no idea who the main character. I have names for all the other characters. Well, a lot of the other characters. I have no idea what the main character's name is going to be. Yeah. I don't know. Some of your names might show up at some point. It might be useful. But I won't write about you. I mean, I might just borrow your name or something. Someday. Okay. Yeah? Be good. Okay. So, I probably have to get to the library. But thank you. These were really good questions. Thank you very much for doing this. And good. And we're going to probably be on this for eternity or something. Just scary. Anyway. All right? Yep. Good. Thanks. Starla, I'm going to turn it off. Karaya's going to turn it off. Thank you, Karaya.
I'm gonna go for
Really? All right, thank you guys. Thank you, audience. Oh, Kathleen, are those your keys?
No, those
Are those Darlene's?
yeah.
Oh.
I think it was my first question. I said, what is your writing kryptonite?
Oh, yeah, I just, either I wasn't paying attention or my ears aren't that great, but, yeah, oh, okay, sorry.
Okay.
And